Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello everybody at home and welcome to Houselights. We are doing House of Miller, specifically George Miller, and today he has to share the spotlight with his friend and colleague George Ogilvy, who co-directed Mad Max 3, also known as Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. And this is going to we're three stops into our George Miller house on our way to Fury Road next week. And this has been a journey. This has been an absolute journey because I once thought I was a Mad Max fan. And so now we get to articulate why that may or may not be true. And I am your co-host, Tristan Riddell, and with me as always is Raggedy Kessel himself, John Mills, and Darren Blaster Moser. How are you guys doing tonight?
3 podcasters enter, 1 podcaster leaves. So this could be a bloody podcast. I hope not. I hope that we can all, practice some mercy here, beyond Thunderdome, because if anything, we don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home.
I mean, we've got Tina Turner in this. I mean, come on. Mm-hmm. I mean, that screams 80s right then and there. And this is also the first American financed Mad Max film. And another reason why Tina Turner is in it. And so I want to know, Darren, when was the first time that you watched this? Was this your first time watching this, or were you a wee lad when this entered your brain?
This was the first time watching this. I think maybe I'd seen a clip of like the actual Thunderdome fight, but I had no idea. I mean, I knew there was a dome and thunder was involved, but let me tell you, when we get to that second act, guys, I got thoughts because I did not see that coming a mile away. The kids arc and the crash plane, I had no idea that was part of the story. So that took me completely by surprise. You didn't think we were going to
get a second and a third movie in this motion picture? You didn't think we were going to get 3 separate movies?
Basically, the Gyro Captain, but not the Gyro Captain, shows up for like Act 3, and it's.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because bringing him back and having him play a different character, but not just a different character, but a different character that has a kid with him in the beginning, where if you've watched Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, you think to yourself, wait, did the feral kid like clean up? Like, what happened here? What's going on? And I remember as a kid, I did see this on videotape, and my dad, who had seen the previous 2, watching it with me, and me as a kid really having a hard time getting past the idea that they were different characters, and saying to my dad, how could they be different characters?
I just always assumed it was the same character, really. Like,
I had a hard time
I'm just now learning this. I'm learning this for the first time. They're different characters?
I'd seen in an interview...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd seen in an interview with that actor, and basically they're like, we'd like to bring you back. It's kind of like the Gyro Captain, but different. Like, that's how they pitch it to him. Like, they're not bringing you back as the Gyro Captain, which I don't know why you couldn't. The Gyro Captain survives. I always took it to be that was the son of him and that blonde lady that he had a fancy for. I know the timeline maybe doesn't work out. Like, that kid is fairly old for however much time is supposed to have passed, but maybe it's a Nick Liccardo kind of situation where they couldn't call him the Gyro Captain. I don't know.
No.
But all intents and purposes, he is the Gyro Captain.
No, they did say, okay, because this is Bruce Spence's own recollection, where he said they were well into the shoot when they offered me a part described as, quote, not the Gyro Captain, but kind of like the Gyro Captain, close quote. They said there's kind of a reflection of him, and that they were having difficulty casting the role, so they thought to themselves, why not Bruce? And I think right here we can say, well, there's one good reason why not Bruce, because we all know him as a previous... If you're going to bring him back, just rewrite the character as something else.
To be the Gyro. Yeah. Well, and also, how on earth would this be a difficult role to cast?
That's a good question.
What does he do? He doesn't do anything.
Now, this is the one thing where I would say I could see them saying they're having trouble casting the role, because the whole reason that there are two directors on this is because Miller was not in the headspace of really being fully invested in it, because his producing partner died in a helicopter accident while scouting locations for the film. So he brought in Ogilvy specifically to help him with the film, because he was like, I'm grieving. I don't quite know how to get through this. And I mean, I guess to his credit, that's good. He recognized that he wasn't going to be able to power through, but he had obligations. He had a cast. He had a crew. But maybe that's why they wrote this character, and they just said, "Well, I don't know. How about get Bruce back? Everybody likes Bruce."
What it feels like is they're like, "Oh, we want a character like that filled the role of the gyro captain, like this kind of, a loner who's in the wasteland." And then the more the character quote unquote evolved, the more it was like, why not just make it the gyro? I don't know why for some reason they don't want to just call it that. Because like you said, John, they took it too far and then brought it full circle by actually casting the same actor to play a similar role that everybody is going to assume. Even Tristan is assuming. I assumed. Yep. I don't think we ever even hear his name in this movie.
When we get to that point when Max actually sees him face to face for the first time, I'm just like, oh, I wonder how this is going to go down.
He recognizes him, doesn't he?
No, he doesn't recognize him. And I was just like, oh, maybe there was like some weird deleted scene, where he moves on from it or something like that. It was, I just thought it was like, oh, they didn't take the time to actually have this moment where he shows recognition.
Well, what I find
so utterly strange.
What I find interesting is, in all honesty, we go through and 3 films in, essentially this exists, I guess, in an era where they weren't as concerned about connected universe and continuity and stuff like that. And even though Star Wars kicks the door open on that right off, and there's a sort of thing where maybe it's just like these 3 movies feel really like just somebody sitting there and saying, it's almost like each previous one is a rough draft of where they wanted to go. Like it's developing and it's like, okay, those first 2, we were kind of there. Let's try this out, this permutation. So stuff that I would normally regard as the development of a script. And in an earlier version, Max was like this and he fought these guys, but then they changed it a little bit to bring in this flying guy. Like it's almost like you can see it as sort of like a live story development arc.
Well, that brings us back to the beginning here with you, John. When was the first time you saw this?
Oh yeah, on video. My dad was there this time with this one. He had seen the Mad Max movies by that point. My love of film comes straight from my dad, so it makes sense to me that I would have seen it on video with him. So obviously it wasn't the year that it came out. I was, a little bit older and everything, and I will never forget that conversation with him, where as a kid I was like a dog with a bone. I couldn't let go of the idea of Bruce Spence being a different character. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? I liked him in the last movie. Why is he different here? And my dad trying to explain to me very gently, he's like, well, sometimes movies, they do different stuff, but they might cast the same person, but just in a different role. But I remember seeing the movie, and I remember certain things about the movie. This isn't one that I revisit frequently. The Road Warrior is the one where I'll do that because of its own emotional thing. But tied to what you said, Darren, everybody who refers to this movie, who makes any sort of reference to this movie, basically just talks about the opening act. Nobody ever talks about the rest of the movie. They just talk about Thunderdome. They just go, Master Blaster, like all of those sorts of things. They talk about Tina Turner. They talk about We Don't Need Another Hero. Nobody ever talks about the rest of this movie. It is
That's why
crazy.
I had no idea
exactly
that we were going to talk about that at all.
It's nuts. It's nuts.
Darren, I'm glad that you brought up the Lord of the Flies stuff, because when I watched it, because when I think back to when I saw these movies, or at least some of these movies, it made me realize I was just like, oh man, I hadn't really seen all of these movies. Like I hadn't seen, like I've seen a little bit of every single one, but not 100% of each movie, because I have distinct memories of watching Thunderdome, but then watching it in preparation for this podcast made me realize, oh my gosh, I had not seen all of Thunderdome. I thought I had, but I have not, because I do not remember Act 2 or Act 3 with Thunderdome. All I remember is, John, what you just talked about is
it's like
Master
we all have
Blaster,
selective
Raggedy
memory.
Man. Yeah, it's absolutely insane, because it's just like I felt like, no, this is a joke. I got like a bad copy or something. I got a joke copy. Like this is an April Fool's copy of Thunderdome. Like clearly this is not the one that I remember watching. And it's just, I looked it up. I looked up the whole Lord of the Flies thing, and apparently, I correct me if I'm wrong here, Miller wanted to do a Lord of the Flies movie, a type movie set in a post-apocalyptic arena, or it might have been like the studio was presented with a Lord of the Flies type story and then said, hey, we could make this a Mad Max film. And that's how we got Act 1 and the very end of Act 3.
Well, what's, to pile on top of that is apparently at least one critic noted that there seemed to be a bit of liberal homage to a work called Ridley Walker, which is a post-apocalyptic novel that bears a lot of similarities. So it seems like
he read that and then was like, that'd be a good second act.
But maybe didn't.
That is exactly what happened.
But it's interesting because I think that in today's environment, I mean, George Lucas got sued over Ewoks, for Pete's sake, as a concept, where a screenwriter took him in and said, oh, he read my script and he stole it from me. And, Lucas's whole defense was like, what? Are you nuts? Actually, I remember Lucas's exact quote was, I noticed nobody ever sued me over Howard the Duck. And it was like, it was a great line. The man has a capacity for zingers when he wants to. But I'm actually surprised there isn't something about, a lawsuit or something. Because I would imagine if the similarities are that much, I've never heard of anybody suing Beyond Thunderdome about these similarities. I've only ever heard about it in the context of a critic who brought it up.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Nobody remembers
I remember something.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. I remember when True Detective came out, season 1 of True Detective, the good True Detective. There was someone brought a suit because all of the existential concepts that Matthew McConaughey's character was fascinated with and started quoting and was talking about in the show was based off of a philosophical work by some guy. And I don't know if the publishing company or the guy, and I'm blanking on the name, but sued them. They said, they're like, you're using my concepts in this, almost verbatim certain times. And I think the writer of True Detective thought he could get away with it because they're just concepts. And it's like, nope, this is stuff written by me that's in a book. And so it just adds even more, credence to, John, what you're talking about is that, if they're taking plot points from a novel and you can get sued over concepts taken from a philosophical works, is it because, it was less litigious in the 80s than it is today? Or was it just as much?
I don't have a real lens on that. I didn't pay much attention to the industry side of things back then, but just while we're talking about it, I decided to click. I was like, oh, well, I've never heard of Ridley Walker. Maybe this is just some sort of obscure thing where this critic happened to be the one guy who read it and was like, oh, Miller, I know what you did. But listen to this. It won the John W. Campbell Memorial Award for Best Science Fiction Novel in 1982. It won an Australian Science Fiction Achievement Award in 1983 and was nominated for the Nebula Award for Best Novel in 1981. So this was not an obscure work by any stretch of the imagination. So it's I don't know why somebody did not bring suit if the similarities are that great. And now I have to read this. I got to know for myself.
Right.
The simplest answer, which is probably the right one, is just that they maybe had an agreement or maybe made contact and said like, hey, we'd like to use concept for like the fact that we don't have it in the Wikipedia article doesn't mean anything. Like that's the, without,
maybe
without
they got the rights to it.
That maybe they got the rights or said like, hey, we're going to be inspired by this. I mean, the fact that he's still named Walker, like the fact that he didn't even change the name of the captain, I have to assume that they made some connection, or like you guys said, it just completely nobody cared and or they didn't care enough had no plans of turning their story into a movie, because usually stuff like that, like Nebula Award winners, like they get turned into movies.
There was a theatrical adaptation that premiered at the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester in February of 1986.
So that's like
crazy.
8 months later.
Dang, that was in the works
when this
then.
movie came out.
Yeah, wild.
I would love to find out more.
Yeah.
For Act 2, I liked it. I thought it was an amazing portrayal of a Oasis isolated, evolution of children growing up with it took me a moment to realize when when they're walking with like the talking stick that has the frame at the end, it's kind of their representation of television. Of the ones that do remember television and like telling the story, like a guiding and keeping I think it's really hard to have dialogue for that kind of a situation that hits and isn't cringe. Like it's a really fine line to hit, but I felt for the most part, it worked really well. I mean, what do they say? Like, keeping the story, like telling the tale, like everything they say over and over. I totally buy that this is a group that I don't know how long they've been stuck, but they are perpetuating this story, and you can see how it's sliding from fiction into like myth, inside this tribe. So I didn't expect it. I wasn't expecting it in this movie, but I really enjoyed that type of a story for the second act. I think it worked.
I always like, the term, I originally heard the term from our fellow friend and podcaster, Mike Schindler, about a gear shift movie. I like those movies too. I like a movie where all of a sudden it's something else because it's interesting and it's an intriguing, and in all honesty, it's sort of how life actually happens, where you think you're going along and then all of a sudden it's something else. And you say, oh, wait, I have to adapt to this situation. Something happened in my life. Something happened in someone else's life. Everything's different. So I like the fact that there's a gear shift for it because, completely honest, Bartertown is a great concept. That is not a full movie. Like a full movie would require a lot more for Bartertown to remain interesting and not just turn into, well, Mad Max becomes the champion and just starts fighting repeatedly in Thunderdome for his freedom or something. That's what this movie's in danger of becoming. And instead, it has, I think I struggle for the right word, but it has the ability, I think, to switch over and make me realize the story is going to be something that basically Thunderdome is the prologue, and the title isn't lying. Mad Max goes beyond Thunderdome. And so it's literally there in the title, and I can say, oh, okay, so the real story is this. This is to introduce us to Max and what he's capable of, and now we're at the real story where he's going to, pair up with these lost children and try to lead them to salvation.
Well, and it's
I think
still
I'd have to
story.
disagree with Bartertown not being enough for a movie.
Okay.
I think I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one, and here's why.
All right.
So with Bartertown, you have a lot of politics going on, and a lot of interesting politics, because you have, the top layer that everybody sees. You have almost literal stratification where you have Bartertown above ground, and then all these little shops like the Atomic Cafe and, like the I think like the Collector and everything like that. And then literally above them, looking over them on another level, is Auntie, Tina Turner, who believes that she's, leading Bartertown, that she created Bartertown. But then you have someone underneath in literal pig feces powering all of it. And he's able to force her to say that he runs Bartertown. And so that's the entire reason why she wants him taken out. And then, Mad Max does it. And then, we have the master who is dethroned and forced to live with the pigs. And then we leave and come back and try to connect the two stories unsuccessfully. And then we have a nice chase. I would have loved to have seen what that meant for Bartertown. I would have loved to have seen how Bartertown changed. It would have been interesting to see the political ramifications and how Max got mixed up in it. And not like I didn't want to see the movie that you were talking about where like, oh, he's just like stuck in Thunderdome and he has to keep fighting out. Yeah, no, I think you're right. That's not interesting. But if you focused on how Bartertown changed, or how maybe if you wanted to connect them, how Auntie, now that Auntie had real control over all of it, she wanted to expand and get real water and, go after the oasis, then, maybe you'd have some sort of reasoning for the last 15 minutes.
Allow me to say this. I think that's very valid counterpoint to what I was saying. Let me say that the mindset I'm coming from when I say Bartertown doesn't support a whole film is I don't see anything in Mad Max or The Road Warrior that indicates that we would have gotten your version of things and not my version of things. Make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. But I think that can also be said that nothing in Mad Max or Road Warrior shows that we would have gotten anything related to Lord of the Flies.
As a counterpoint to that, you might be right, but I don't wish to say so. So we're just going to have to agree to disagree. Good enough?
I think that's what I think we can move forward on
wonder, that one. So you have the second movie where it is framed around this narrative device of it's being told from the feral child's point of view, or it's being told as a story in general. And I feel it's interesting because in a way, the third movie is told like a story, and in a way it's not. The story aspect of it makes me think of the very end where Max doesn't go on the plane. Max is still the road warrior. Mac's story never ends. It kind of cannot end. It has to always be ongoing. And the fact that it's almost a myth in that regard. And no, actually, I think about it, it is a story because it's being told by those that escaped, that make it to Sydney or wherever, and are telling the story of, how they went from the oasis to the city, which I guess is better. I don't know. But
right?
Yeah, right. But seeing Bartertown and what happened next, I felt like we already kind of saw that, because once Master was deposed, like, it wasn't going so well. Like, there was no one with the smarts to run the system down below well enough to keep it running. Like, I think Auntie kind of didn't know what she had that was going on. And even though she wasn't on top, it was a balanced system that was functioning. And by deposing Master, I think it's all going to fall apart. I think when they rode back into town...
We didn't see that fall apart, though.
Well, but we saw it falling apart. We saw it starting to, because after... I see what you're saying. I mean, I'm taking it from the fact that when Master was disposed and wasn't helping, it was falling apart. And yes, she had threatened him enough that he was going to help, but now he's been removed. So I assume it's going to default back to like the time when he wasn't helping, and they don't know how to run the machinery efficiently enough to make it continually produce the methane. So I think that's the future that they have in store.
I mean, the thing is, I think that what we are all getting at is that this once again exposes the shortcomings of the series up to this point. in that we're all latching on to one or two things here or there. We might not agree with what the solution would be, but we're all sitting here feeling like, well, this almost clicks here, but it doesn't quite. I mean, while we're sitting here talking about it, you make the gyro captain Bruce Spence's character again, and then when they fly away, instead of having them light a beacon with other wanderers that are out there, have him take them to the place that we believe was established at the end of Mad Max 2, and you've got everything tied together. Everybody's happy. Nobody's confused about who the hell Bruce Spence is. And we have, this sort of continuing story, and you can still have the beacon. We still want Max to come home whenever he decides to come home, even though he's out there still being the road warrior. Like, it's one of those things where I think that there are some great ideas at play, and what we're all getting at is that they never quite mesh the way that we think they could have, and maybe the way that they should have. And in a sense, I wonder if that is a function of Miller's ready at this point. We see some of those design elements that are going to be really kick-ass with Fury Road start to creep in here. And you go, oh, like when you see Bartertown, that is that design aspect that everybody relates to this series now.
Even more so than Road Warrior.
It is there. Yeah. There is an identity here, and I really have to wonder if it's just he just was not in the emotional place to carry through.
I think you nailed it, John, in the fact that in a way this is almost kind of a retelling of the second story of Mad Max the Road Warrior. I mean, yes, the setting's different, but in the broad strokes, it's Max on his journey, gets caught up with whatever his action is happening, and rides off into the sunset. I mean, big broad strokes. So I will say that I feel like Fury Road, that we're almost to, is kind of, again, telling that same, like you could pick up that Fury Road story anywhere. That story could take place between the two, as far as we know. It doesn't matter. But it's George Miller kind of retelling not exactly the same story, but really it's like every time he's ramping up and the elements of this world are becoming more and more fleshed out, reaching their crescendo in Fury Road. But it's also kind of weird because don't they not say Max's name in this movie? Like, I don't think
say it once.
They say, okay, because I feel like they go out of their way to not say it, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, Max introduces himself to Master and said I think the Master says, "Who you?" and he says, "Me, Max."
Okay,
yes.
But because every other time he talks to like Auntie or he talks to the kids, like he never says his name.
Yeah, he just says he's like, "I'm not Walker."
Yeah, I'm not Walker.
Yeah, he never says like,
I'm not
Max,
or I'm a fighter, or
and I'm mad about it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so John, I want to ask you a question. So you were talking about, kind of like seeing George Miller's. Well, you talked about what we are holding on to with the previous films, what doesn't work, and what does work, and what leading up to, as we've said before, crescendo to Fury Road. What do you think does work in his directorial style? Like starting with Mad Max, going to 2, and then now Thunderdome. Like, what's the thread that you see? Where do you see George Miller in Thunderdome that you've seen previously in the 2 that came before?
I would say that when we're there in the environs of Bartertown, I see Miller and his style there because I see the guy that had the vision for the group, the antagonistic group in the Road Warrior, with a budget in Bartertown. I say, oh, this guy has money now. That I can tell that that's a George Miller movie because of the way that the design flair is, the way that the characters are very big. They're very, overbearing. I might not remember any of the names, but I remember the saxophone player. I remember Auntie. I remember these characters that are interesting, and Max is treated with a great deal of affection by the character in the setup. And so I can tell that Miller is there in that. Where I lose Miller is when they leave Bartertown. That is where I see Miller sort of spiritually departing, and it could be anybody's movie at that point. I don't see anything beyond that section that says to me, that's George Miller. I see George Miller in the beginning. I see maybe a little bit in the end, with the getaway, but that middle section, he's nowhere to me. I can't see him anywhere in there.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. I absolutely agree.
It's coming from that
Darren,
book.
do you have anything to add to that?
About. No, I agree. I think like John said, I don't mind the change, the gear shift change. I as a presentation of a Lord of the Flies pocket, evolved group of kids, like I thought it was really, really well done. One of the best ways I've ever seen done in a movie. I don't know if it belongs in the middle of a Mad Max movie. Like if that had been in the middle of Fury Road, I would have been like, what is going on? Like, what is happening? Because, we talk about action, like it stops dead for that whole sequence. And we're like, I'm still not sure, like what, like are half the kids still back at the Oasis? Are others still lost in the wasteland? Like it's kind of loose threads a lot. But for what it was, I didn't mind it.
I want to ask you guys something that confuses me. And this is not me trying to establish my own opinion. This is genuinely a question about like what you think about this. So with Tina Turner and as Auntie, so we see the Master as the antagonist, where, Max is in league with Auntie to get rid of the Master, to depose him. And then, by not killing Blaster, Auntie gets pissed off and then kicks him out of Bartertown. Doesn't kill him, just kicks him out. And I don't think the writers know what a gulag is, but that's neither here nor there. And so, he then finds the Oasis, and then somehow, for some reason, people, like the kids think that maybe Bartertown's Tomorrowland. And Max thinks it's really important to get Master. So he steals Master, and then he destroys Bartertown. And then Auntie goes and chases them to get Master back. Why? Why did this happen? Why did Max feel the need to steal Master? Why did Max feel the need to destroy Bartertown? And are we supposed to hate Auntie? Are we supposed to dislike her? Are we supposed to think that she had it coming? Is she evil? Is she, what's going on here? Like, why did he do those things? And as an audience member, are we supposed to think Auntie deserved, and all those other people deserved to have their town destroyed? From a narrative standpoint.
These are all really good questions, Tristan.
From a narrative standpoint, no. But I would say that much the way that the other Mad Max movies work previous to this one, it's more about the emotional sense that the audience knows that Bartertown is an unjust place by nature, and we're supposed to root for Max to be the catalyst to change all of that. And, consequences be damned. It's very... sort of like old school serial thinking. Why does the town have to be destroyed or upended or something like that? Well, that's because that's what the hero does. That's what the hero does. And by implication, that person talking is not the hero. Therefore, that person talking is not good. And if the hero takes some action that causes them pain or misfortune, it's justified because that's the hero. I honestly, it is, I think, as straightforward as that it's just working on an emotional beat as opposed to a story logic beat. At least that's what I take away with it.
Darren, do you have anything, any counterpoint?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, when you lay it out like that, it's like, well, when you say it like that, yeah, it doesn't, it doesn't really make sense. And when Max is banished, it feels very like Judge Dredd, where it's like, oh, well, we didn't kill him. It's like, yeah, but you kind of set him out into the desert with like nothing. So you kind of did. Like, that's the intent, obviously. And him
and what
even
a waste
coming
of a horse.
back. Well, yeah, I know. Whatever. But him coming back is almost circumstantial because he's only back because it's the closest place for them. Like, they could have just gone back to the Oasis if they happened to be closer. But he's like, oh, we're closer to Bartertown, so let's go there. And then when he gets there, the kids are already in the tunnel, so he's got to follow them. And it's like, so it's kind of carrot horse moving him along. And yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense because we don't really know what is his motivation. Like, his motivation is to escape with his stuff. That's his motivation for the bulk of the movie. And so I guess he's like, maybe that was his plan, but it ends up like, I don't feel like he's taking the kids out. The only reason he escaped with Master and the kids is because that thing was built on a train and the guy turned it on. Like, that was very circumstantial. That wasn't Max's plan to get out of there. He almost just jumped on because that's what was happening. Kind of like in Mad Max, the Road Warrior, like, it's the other group's plan to take the tanker, and Max is kind of along for the ride with the plan. He doesn't come up with the plan. But yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I also don't know how all those people could fit in that plane and it could take off. There's a plane that apparently can only hold like a man and a child. There's no way. That was very much TARDIS physics of fitting all those people inside.
And on top of that, to piggyback off of what you just said, Darren, so we're supposed to believe that Pig Killer, befriended Max's monkey, trained Max's monkey to carry water and to find him in the middle of the desert just so that we could keep that character alive to get him to the Oasis.
I don't understand what the problem is. Could you repeat it?
I'm not going to say that again.
No, I'm just saying I
all
struggle.
Those words,
where is the issue with that? I don't know. Where is that? It seems perfectly.
It makes
sense.
It makes just as much sense as all of a sudden the Master turning into a British professor at the end. What was that? What the hell was
were
that?
all those clothes inside the caboose? Because they were there, and he's all ready to change into his
Master became
clothes.
a professor because he's smart. That's what you do. You become a professor, right?
But I don't understand it. Like, he's wearing literal S&M outfits covered in pig feces.
Yes.
And then we switch to him outside with the kids during the chase.
And he's Henry Jones Sr.
He's Henry Jones Sr. wearing glasses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What? Where?
Well,
when?
He's not
Why?
going to wear that when he's in pig feces, Tristan. He's obviously keeping that in the closet somewhere. Why would you wear that while you're doing pig feces? I like, seriously, how hot it is down there and humid. I mean, come on, you're going to ruin a good suit. But then he's out in the dry desert.
Gosh.
It makes perfect sense.
Are they implying that? Because I'm thinking more about how he talks. Is he talking like that because Blaster can only understand that? Because if he's this professor smart person, which he obviously is smart, but he talks in very stinted English of like, me smart, you go do this. And maybe that's just because that's what Blaster cannot cope with.
Either that or they had seen...
Well, he didn't have his tweet on yet.
Well, I mean, they had already seen The Empire Strikes Back, and they thought Yoda was pretty cool. That could also be an explanation.
Yeah. John, I feel like you're running out of defense for this.
Oh, no, I
like you're just gonna...
I just mounted a perfect defense right there. They saw Yoda, thought it was good. There you go. Boom.
Wait, your previous defense was say it again, Tristan. Say it again.
No, it wasn't a defense. I was just saying it made perfect sense. I mean, come on. If anything, the monkey should have had the tweed suit on to show how smart he was to be trained so quickly to do that. Right? That's what I think.
That would have made a better time.
I feel like we're drifting. We're drifting.
I think we are drifting. And you know what? Honestly, we might need to wrap this up.
The only thing I want to say before we get to that point is I gotta know. We don't need another hero. Parentheses Thunderdome. was a #1 hit in Canada, #2 in the U.S., and #3 on British single charts. And One of the Living won the award for Best Female Rock Vocal Performance at the Grammy Awards, showing that Tina Turner was still very much a force in American culture in the mid-'80s.
Was that the song that played at the beginning of the movie?
Yeah.
Or
one
the
of
end
the
credits or something?
Yeah, One of the Living was over the opening credits, and then We Don't Need Another Hero, Thunderdome was at the end credits.
Because the opening credits, I was also not expecting. I mean, I knew Tina Turner was in it, so it made sense about 2 seconds in. But I also was like, what am I watching? Because it starts with this like rock ballad, and I'm like, Max, where are you, Max? What's going on, Max?
I actually got to say, as stupid as this might sound, it's not really any dumber than, training a monkey in a day to, go out to the desert. But I was bothered with the font choice in the opening title cards because it didn't seem appropriate to a Mad Max movie. I know how dumb that sounds, but I'm sitting there and I'm like, really? This is the font we're going with? No. It really felt like somebody who got a budget and they were like, what's a high budget movie look like? They use serif fonts. Serif fonts? Yeah, let's use a serif font. Cool. Like it was just, it made no sense. That's my take.
No, I was actually thinking that the other day when I started Scorsese's Silence. I was like, is that the font we really want to go with, Marty? Is it really what we want to do?
Yeah.
No, I think that stuff all the time too. We haven't even talked about the timelines or the perceived timelines of the Blue Lagoon Lord of the Flies thing going on. With all the kids of varying ages and everything like that.
Yeah, that's true. Because I personally am assuming that they are the children or that they're the children of the crashed people, not that they were birthed after the crash. I don't feel like they're second generation, but I don't know. I think
in the novelization, there was some second generation stuff going on.
Which I believe, but I just don't feel like it's been that long. Like Max hasn't aged a generation since, and we saw him unless maybe they crashed during Mad Max 1 or previous to that. It could have happened.
Well, I think that's the thing I think that's what they were saying is that like they crashed during Mad Max or Road Warrior or at least before then. And
but they know about the atomic bomb.
So I guess it would have been Road Warrior then. So it would have been around the time of Road Warrior that they crashed. And I think Thunderdome takes place 15 years after Road Warrior. Not Road Warrior, Mad Max. I think Thunderdome takes place 15 years post Mad Max. And I think in the novelization, the lead female in Lord of the Flies in the Oasis, like when she's bawling her eyes out when one of the kids, drowns in the sand, I think in the novelization it was maybe her kid.
Mm-hmm.
I could be remembering that wrong, but I think that was floated around.
As they were just deciding to leave the Oasis, I thought one of them said, well, so-and-so is almost ready. Like someone was about to give birth of the group.
Yeah.
But it was really fast, and I didn't really want to watch it again, so I didn't rewind. But,
I think you're right. So I think there are some second generation kids in there, and that's why I made the joke about Blue Lagoon and Lord of the Flies put together.
Well, because if you assume that the eldest ones are, like, let's say they were maybe like 10 or something, and then they grow up an additional like 10 years. Or more. I'm just trying to think of like, if you're the 16-year-old, you're going to have proper speech and proper knowledge. That's already baked into you. So how young would the oldest have had to have been when the crash happened? So maybe there were a lot more second gen than we think of, or maybe it's more when the parents left, because that's when the decay of knowledge and speech would have started.
And then it's just so weird to me that like all the adults are like, let's all leave the kids behind and see.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. Like all of us, like none of us stay, but all of us are going to leave.
All right. I think we're getting to that point, folks. John, I want to start with you. Like how many when you look back and you're keeping on telling the story, how many buckets of pig feces are you giving this film?
Well, I want to go ahead and say that that's one heck of a scale, because it feels like if I give it more, that's actually a slight. So, okay. I will say also that this did make Ebert's top 10 list for the year of its release. He gave it a 4 out of 4 stars.
He gave it a 4 out of 4. Yeah.
And he thought it was just amazing, an original movie idea about how to stage a fight and all of that sort of things. I'm going to have to disagree with Mr. Ebert, God rest his soul, just a little bit on this, because we use a 5-star scale here, and everybody knows that's more authoritative. And so I would say out of a potential 5 buckets of pig feces, I'm going to have to give it a 3, because it starts strong and then it gear shifts and I'm okay with it. And then I'm sort of, by the time it gets to the escape at the end, I've sort of tuned out a bit. And so I get why everybody, I still make reference to Master Blaster and all of that sort of stuff. But once you get out of that opening act, it's an okay movie and it just doesn't deliver. So 3 out of 5 from me.
Darren, how about you?
Yeah, I went back and forth a bit on this one, because I generally enjoyed it. It was not like, oh man, Road Warrior, the Road Warrior is the pinnacle of what it was, and man, why did they make the third? I mean, it's the third one. Like, we all know those are really hard to like pull off and pull out. And yeah, I feel like my initial impression is tempered a little bit from just actually discussing it, and actually, like, especially when you started bringing up like that third act, I'm like, yeah, that really doesn't make a lot of sense on what's going on and how the story is going. And then that second act as a whole, what is going on. But I really like the second act for its depiction of what it is. I think, like I said before, for that kind of sequestered enclave of kid Lord of the Flies thing, I have not seen it presented that well in television or film. I mean, not that I'm hunting down those kinds of movies on a weekly basis to try to find the perfect Lost Tribe movie, but I think what it does is really good and really interesting and stays off of the cringe verbiage. Like, it sticks and I buy it. It's not like, whoa, they're saying we're going to go to Tomorrowland, but because they're kids, I buy that. I buy that slang and that verse, and it works for me. Does it work perfectly in a Mad Max movie? Who's to say? I mean, we can kind of throw whatever we want at the wall, but it was also interesting to see we're progressing and the Mad Max world is evolving, but I did not realize how much Thunderdome was going to contribute to the ethos of Mad Max and the vehicles and the chases, and there's other cities out there, and there's we're now well into the wasteland, and society is kind of rebuilding itself. And we're going to obviously see a progression in that with Fury Road. But so all that to say, I'm going to give it the same reused 3 feces buckets, because I'm being really economical. Can't throw those buckets away. Got to use them again.
For me, as I, talked about at the top of the episode, is that Thunderdome has solidified that I am not a Mad Max fan. I am a Fury Road fan, and I think Thunderdome was the nail in the coffin for me with Act 2 and Act 3, because all I could remember was Act 1, and I was just like, oh yeah, Thunderdome's pretty cool. Yeah, I remember that. No, I remember like 30 minutes of it. And with all the stuff that I talked about what doesn't work and just doesn't make sense, and confusing narratives and confusing motivation, and it just didn't feel like good filmmaking to me. It just felt like, John, you and I talked about emotion over a narrative storytelling point. It just feels stilted and weird and schizophrenic, and I I don't like this gear shift. It completely takes me out of the film, and it kills it dead. And like in the previous two films, you know, like I'm bored for a long time. Like it starts out interesting, and then I'm bored for a super long time. And then we have this really cool chase scene for the last 15 or 10 minutes. It's the same way with the first and second one. I do not think this is a good movie. I'm going to give it a generous 2.5 buckets. So it's right up, it's the same rating as I gave Road Warrior, I think.
Yeah, it is. Is that a half bucket, like half full, or did you cut the bucket in half, like vertical?
Half full, because I'm too lazy to cut the bucket in half.
Well, and you know, it's interesting. Like, we're obviously critiquing these, but they're all in the shadow of Fury Road. They really are. Like, we have not been able to not at least mention Fury Road in every single one of these discussions. So it's on the horizon. It's cresting. I can see it. It's almost here.
Yeah, my wife, who watched most of these with me, was just like, oh, when Thunderdome was over, she's like, oh, thank God, we're almost at Fury Road.
Fair.
We're just one step closer.
Maybe our next podcast is only the good movies. That's what forget this like directed works. We're only top 5 movie all the time. You know, it's just more enjoyable. But you know, we're willing to do it for you listeners. And speaking of that, thank you listeners for sticking with us for all of Mad Max, and we hope that you stick with us for one more Mad Max film that takes place. So we get to see a huge jump in timeline from 85 to when is Fury Road? 30 years.
15, man, 30 years. 30 years of growth, 30 years of change of perspective. This is what Houselights is all about, is that looking at the director's works, seeing how they've changed, if they have changed, or what they've done differently. And what you should do is go to thenerdparty.com for all of our previous episodes. Click on Houselights iconography, and then you'll be able to see all of our backlogged episodes and see all of the other directors that we've covered. And also let us know what you think of the show, or if you have any directors that you would like us to talk about, by going to thenerdparty.com/contact, selecting Houselights, filling out the form. We'll get it right then and there. So, as Darren talked about, we're doing Fury Road next week. And so please tune in as we close the door on House of Miller.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.